Have you ever been at a party, everyone's glued to the TV, screaming about the big game, and you're just not feeling it at all? If that sounds like you, then you are in exactly the right place. We are going to dive into the fascinating psychology of why some people just couldn't care less about sports.
And yeah, it can feel kind of isolating, can it? Especially when you see a number like this. A full 60% of Americans actively follow sports. That's most people. That means the majority of people you know are tuned in.
So that means if you're here with me, you're probably in that other 40%. And I bet you've wondered at some point, what's wrong with me? Why don't I get it? Well, here's the good news. The answer is a big, fat no. There is nothing wrong with you. See, this isn't about you lacking passion or not being a team player. The latest research tells us it's something way deeper. It's about how your brain is fundamentally, and pretty fascinatingly, wired. Okay, so let's start with our ancient programming. Our brains literally evolved for survival, and a huge part of that was belonging to a tribe. And right here, we find our first major split: group identity versus individualism. For millions of people, sports teams are basically modern-day tribes. It's wild. When a fan watches their team, their brain actually releases oxytocin. That's the bonding hormone. It's the same chemical that makes you feel connected to your family and closest friends. Their brain is telling them, hey, these guys are your clan. And the difference is pretty stark. The sports fan's brain, it's often geared up for that us versus them mentality. But for the non-fan, that identity is much more self-contained. And this isn't just a hunch. A 2019 study actually confirmed that people who aren't interested in sports show way less of this tribal kind of thinking. But okay, it's not just about the social part of our brain, it's also about the reward system. And that brings us to what I like to call the dopamine game, and the real science of what makes sports so addictive for some people. Just think about any game. You have no idea what's going to happen next, right? It's completely unpredictable. Well, that very uncertainty is the trigger. It makes the brain release a little hit of dopamine, creating this super powerful addictive reward loop. It's like a constant little buzz of anticipation. And just how powerful is this loop? Well, it works on the same principle that makes slot machines so effective. And no, that's not an exaggeration. This mechanism, it's called intermittent reinforcement, and it is one of the most powerful psychological tools for creating a habit. So the big question, why doesn't this work on you? Well, for non-fans, it seems like that specific dopamine trigger, it's just switched off. Your brain's reward system just doesn't light up for this kind of thing. And some fascinating research from the University of Chicago even suggests this could be genetic, linked to little variations in our dopamine receptor genes. And there's another really cool layer to this reward system. It's a phenomenon that psychologists call burging. That stands for basking in reflected glory. It's basically when a fan's own self-esteem gets tangled up with how well their team is doing. I mean, you've heard this a million times. When the team wins, a fan always says, "We won." But when they lose, it's almost always, "They lost." Did you catch that? That little switch in pronouns is everything. Non-fans just don't really do that because their sense of self isn't riding on a victory they had absolutely no control over. Okay, so if it's not just about tribes and dopamine, what else is going on here? Well, that brings us to the empathy equation. Because the truth is, it's not that you don't care, it's about where you choose to put that caring.
And we've actually got data on this. A 2021 study on personality traits found something pretty amazing. People who aren't into sports, they score way higher on a key trait called openness to experience. This basically points to a mind that's really curious and is drawn to all sorts of different kinds of stimulation.
So where does all that empathetic energy go? Well, instead of a team, it's often poured into things like art and music or social causes, creative projects, intellectual puzzles, or just really deep personal relationships. You're still getting that amazing feeling of connection, just from a completely different source. And all of that leads us right into our final section, which is all about narrative, and really asking the question, whose story are you choosing to follow? The whole difference really boils down to this. The sports fan often gets meaning from something called parasocial investment. It's like watching somebody else's story unfold from the sidelines. But the non-fan, they usually prefer direct engagement. They'd rather be a participant in their own story, where they actually have some say in how things turn out. This is the question that the non-fan's brain is asking, even if it's subconsciously. Why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I can't control, performed by people I don't know, in a game that doesn't affect my actual life? And you know what? From a purely logical standpoint, it's a perfectly reasonable question. So let's bring it all home. We've looked at tribalism, dopamine, narrative, all of it. And the conclusion isn't that one side is right and the other is wrong. It's that you're just playing a completely different game. And that's not a flaw in your system, it's a feature. And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. You are not broken. You're not boring. You are not missing out on some essential human experience. You are simply, and wonderfully, wired differently. Your brain's entire system, its rewards, its tribal instincts, where it puts its empathy, it's all just calibrated its own way. Which really just leaves us with one final thought. You're not watching the game because you're busy playing your own. So the real question isn't, why don't you care about sports? The real question is, with all that time and all that emotional energy you're saving, what will you build? Who will you connect with? What amazing story will you write?